Welcome back, everybody, to the Crypto Conversion Podcast. As usual, it's Brandon, Matt, and Connor here. Guys, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing as good as I always am.
Great, enjoying this Easter season.
Yeah, it is the Easter season. We are in the octave of Easter for us Catholics here. So it is all celebrations. No need for meatless Fridays in this Easter season. We'll be back on the wagon though, post Pentecost, I guess. For those of us that fast on Fridays, it's always something we do as Catholics on Fridays. We do a little something. For some people, post Vatican II, it hasn't always had to be meat. It could be sugar or caffeine, maybe, or just do your own version of sacrifice. So, but right now we are in a celebratory season. He is truly risen indeed. Alleluia. And let's get into this episode. Just We're gonna start with some new stuff. I guess first off, I forgot. I should probably ask how everybody's Easter was. Did everybody have a good Easter? I'm sorry. That would be most appropriate, I suppose.
I had a great Easter. I mean, I love the Triduum, the Holy Thursday, Good Friday, Easter Vigil combination there. And so, yeah, and then saw a lot of family on Easter. So,
Nice.
I had a great Easter too. This is probably the first Easter that I did not celebrate with my family, living in Louisiana now. So a little bit of a different Easter, but a couple from my church invited me over to spend Easter with them, which was nice. So yeah, I had a good Easter.
That's good. Yeah, so you'll get a kick out of this, Matt. So my daughter we went on Holy Thursday, and that's like right around bedtime. My daughter's 5 months old, so she they were using the trash incense on Thursday, and I know I shouldn't be picky about that, but my daughter was not a fan of it, and so she was insufferable. I felt terrible for her, and we were supposed to go back to where my family's from for Easter to spend the weekend with them because my brother's fiance was coming into the church. We were going to go Holy Saturday. Unfortunately, we made the executive decision on Holy Thursday. We were going to stay home because baby, we have the baby excuse. I know we won't be able to use that forever, but right now we can because her sleep schedule's a lot of whack, and it's getting brighter out, so it's like, I can't sleep when it's bright out, and so we wanted to go home, but instead everybody came to us for Easter. So my parents and my two younger brothers made the trek out to see us on Easter Sunday, which was great. So yeah, we had a great Easter here at the homestead with the visitors, and yeah, all is good in this Easter season. So let's get into the news. I want to start with this one because I kind of like starting with Bitcoin news first because Bitcoin is the prime mover of the crypto space, and this is kind of interesting. Apple has hidden Bitcoin white paper in every Mac since 2018. A tech blogger discovered this by accident, apparently. I'm not sure what credence this all bears. I've always seen stuff like, oh, is Steve Jobs Satoshi? Like, it's just like all these ideas get thrown around. It's very conspiratorial, so I don't want to dwell too much on it, but I'm not a Mac guy, so I need somebody with a Mac like Connor to really kind of look for this for me. So the code is out there to find it. You just gotta look for it, I guess, in the command log on your Macs if you have a newer Mac. So it's pretty accessible. So go check it out. Read the Bitcoin white paper. I don't know. What were your guys' thoughts when you saw this? It's either a really funny joke that one of Apple's developers is playing, or there's some credence here. It's either like crazy, or somebody, or Apple's doing something, or somebody's just playing a really funny joke.
I mean, my guess is funny joke. Like programmers do this all the time. Like the way certain
Sure.
things are named are funny, or there's some theme to it. I think if Apple wanted to like be pro Bitcoin, there's probably easier ways to do that than people finding the white paper 5 years later, hidden in their
And
computers.
they would have chosen to be pro Bitcoin like 2016, 2017, I feel like, if they were really interested in jumping on board.
I
Like I don't know. Like
I think a lot of the tech people really like Bitcoin, though. I mean, even Jack. I'm not sure it was necessarily a joke. It could also just be likely that a lot of the developers working on the operating system, liked it, and it's kind of an Easter egg. Even I don't have a Tesla, obviously, but I know there's a lot of Easter eggs that Elon's embedded into Tesla vehicles that people still discover new things that it can do. So it's just kind of a fun thing. I imagine that the people building the operating system built into it. But yeah, I think like Matt mentioned, if somebody at Apple was Satoshi, it probably would have been a little earlier than 2018 that they would have embedded the white paper.
yeah, and I'm not sure. So essentially, it was like every Mac OS since the Mojave move in 2018. So um, credit to this tech blogger who, I mean, some of these guys, what they discover is just really interesting, and I thought that was pretty hilarious. I found out about this from my chiropractor, who I talk about with this stuff. So if he's listening, shout out. But yeah, it's just kind of funny how this has come to the limelight a little bit, and who knows, maybe Apple is going to be more pro Bitcoin to come. So. Matt, I know you had some stuff for the news. What was it from your end from the ENS name wrapper?
Yeah. So ENS or name wrapper. So ENS, we talk about them all the time. The .eth domains, you can connect them to your wallet, all that jazz. They had previously done subdomains. So if we had crypto conversion, I don't think we have crypto conversion.eth, do we?
We
We have crypto
don't.
conversion network.eth.
Don't mention that. Don't mention that on the podcast. We're waiting for that to expire.
Exactly.
Matt.
Sorry. If you're listening to we'll buy it from you. No, so we have crypto conversion network.eth. Yeah, we'll cut that out. We have crypto conversion network.eth. And so a subdomain could look like matt.cryptoconversionnetwork.eth. So it's adding an additional period and the additional letters or words. And so anyway, I don't know how they were doing it before, but they are using you can now wrap your NFT into a ERC 1155 contract, which is I don't know why they picked that one in particular. We'll dig more into this some other time. But anyway, they've made it, I think, a little more on chain and a little easier to with certain controls. So I could make subdomains to sell them. I could let people have subdomains for free. I can make people renew subdomains the same way they have to renew. We have to renew domains, or if they we give them for free or permanently, as long as the regular name stays there, then you can. The other ones will just exist. So it's I'm interested to see if this will affect. I imagine maybe the standard .eths might go down if people are now on the secondary market of buying these subdomains. I think a lot of last names .eth will be popular because now I can have. Matt.bagazinski.eth, and then I can give to my dad, like, his name .bagazinski.eth, right? And as long as somebody in the family owns the thing, they can, rent out all the subdomains. Like that would be fun. So anyway, I don't know if you guys had heard about that. I don't know if you guys, any other thoughts there?
It does definitely take into consideration how many different ways you can potentially monetize your name, image, and likeness for just the everyday person. That's the thing that I find kind of interesting. I know we talk about NIL in where I sit, when I'm on my football stuff with college football and stuff, and like everybody wants to get paid for their name, image, and likeness in Division 1 sports right now. But I feel like anybody has NIL, and if these are ways you can take advantage of it, you can jump on it, and it could very well be a way to do payments in the future. I mean, shoot, like anything's better than Fed now, I feel like. So why not give it a shot, right? So yeah.
Yeah, they've been talking about doing this for a while. So there's been a lot of like hype around it. A lot of people that are looking at kind of the resale market, but I think realistically, I don't think monetarily a lot of those subdomains are going to be particularly worthwhile in the market. I think most people will want to own whatever their identity is. And if you own a subdomain, but you don't own the top level domain, it's not really the same thing. I do think the use case is really going to be for like big companies that are looking to do some sort of promotion drops, or like you say, big sports organizations, or even, us on the podcast. I could imagine us minting out subdomains as some special, you know, giveaway type of promotion for followers. And there's a lot of use cases there. Even in like big companies, everybody has an email at said company's website.com. That's an obvious use case for what a subdomain system could look like.
So yeah, buy jp.morgan.eth or charles.schwab.eth. Actually, don't do that because they could pull the lever to cancel that. For us, for us peasants, they sometimes don't like us impersonating companies, because if the company actually wants it, they want to give it to them, because then they can say, "Oh, mainstream goes crypto." So yeah, but bygones be bygones. And then would you guys buy a phone released by Solana? This is kind of interesting. And Connor, I know you said that you heard about this last year, but it's actually coming to fruition. Solana is finally releasing the Saga, an Android device that promises to redefine the landscape of Web3 on mobile phones. I mean, I understand why they're using Android as kind of a base platform, because I feel like Android is the most malleable of the cell phone companies. Apple's very rigid, so I feel like if a project was to do something like this, it'd almost have to be through Android or Motorola, just so people could actually use the phone. I don't know what your thoughts are on it from that standpoint, but that's just sort of what I think about it, is like, how can I get this accessible to people, and how can they at least use it like an actual phone with calls and text to start?
Yeah, I wish I was a little more prepared for this, because like I said, I saw this story like a year ago, and a lot of people were making fun of it
Sure.
because it's not the first time a company's tried to make a Web3 phone, and it's kind of like, oh, was a top signal, and honestly, it proved to be something of a top signal at the time. But since then, I've actually seen some people make some good cases for a Web3 phone, which I wish I could pull up some of the Twitter threads that I was reading. But like I said, this was a year ago, so I don't fully remember everything. But I will say the long and short of it is, you look at a lot of how Web3 is used today, and it's not particularly mobile friendly. And it's not mobile friendly because one, yeah, we have to build things that are more user friendly in the Web3 space, but also a lot of the mobile platforms are dominated by these big companies, Apple, Google, and a lot of apps do have to pass through, their regulatory hold in a way. So when you look at points of failure in the Web2 system where things can get censored, a big avenue for that is with these app stores. And because of that, it makes it very difficult to kind of build like a native Web3 mobile platform. So that's a good use case for why we may need a Web3 native phone.
Well, even the article here is using Uniswap's app as an example, being stuck in Apple's like limbo for the longest time,
Yeah, exactly.
just to get released for anybody to use Uniswap. Is there's definitely, you got to wonder from the compliance team standpoint of the Googles and the Apples that are reviewing these apps, to make sure that they'll be kosher with any laws, because they don't want to squander their pile of gold that they're all sitting on. And that's why they're going to be extra critical when it comes to this stuff, because they don't want a tornado cash situation to be on their hands. I essentially that's at least what I think is kind of the linchpin of some of
I think
this.
it's that, but I also think it's that they recognize that in many ways Web3 is kind of a big competitor to their monopoly
Yeah,
hold.
That too. Yeah.
definitely. I
No, it is. It's literally a competitor to Apple Pay and Google Pay.
Sure. Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like a lot of people learned with the whole Twitter debacle with Elon Musk and the $8 and it's $11 on Apple because they take 30% of any. I think as far as I understood, it was 30% of any monetary transfer, and so I just imagine that Uniswap. I mean, all it is in a sense monetary transfers, but they can't take 30%, because it's decentralized, right? There's no way that they can rewrite themselves into those smart contracts. So, definitely from that standpoint too, I think if there was a way for Google or Apple to profit from, having better Web3 capabilities, it might be in their interest, but with it being so decentralized, I think it's hard for that to get them on board.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I like this. I'm going to be interested to see what happens down the stretch here with this as this gets implemented, because who knows, it might be worth actually getting your hands on one. Obviously. So, yeah, but that's just some of the stuff that we thought was kind of unique in the news this week. But yeah, let's hop into the meat and potatoes of today's episode. We started jumping into the network state by Balaji. And just to confirm, it is Balaji, not Balaji, not whatever else we were saying that one episode. I feel like we said his name like 5 different ways. We can confirm it is Balaji. And come to find out, guys, I don't know if I said this, but I'm a kind of a Tim Ferriss fan. 4 Hour Work Week, 4 Hour Chef, 4 Hour Body. Like, I'm a fan of his stuff, just because he does a really good job. Oh, Tools of Titans. He does a really good job of taking like the skills of like people that are at the peak of their like professions, and he does like a synopsis of like, how are you the way you are and how did you get there. And so it's really interesting how he boils some of that down and creates really good indexes for people to do stuff like start businesses or live a digital nomad life, things like that. Very entrepreneurial. But on his podcast, he's been having Balaji on for a while, and I've been listening to the episodes without even realizing that that was Balaji, because I'm listening to it at work. It's like, oh, Tim Ferriss has a crypto guy on. I'm going to listen. Little do I know, I've been listening to Balaji for the past 2 years, and I didn't even know it. I'm looking at it like he has like 3 to 4 hour episodes with Tim Ferriss on his podcast that I've just been passively listening to at work. And then obviously Brantley talked about the network state at the Catholic Crypto Conference, which is how I wet my beak to it. And come to find out that the network state was what Balaji called the 17, I believe it was the 1729 project, which I was also subscribed to. Again, like how I didn't put 2 and 2 together all this time, it just goes to show that I need to look a little more closely when I'm listening to things that I respect and the people that are behind them, because here we are full circle talking about the network state and this notion of what I kind of like want to talk about and dispel is the notion of technological utopianism that some of these guys like Balaji and Elon Musk and Tim Ferriss kind of live in this world a little bit where like kind of like what the network state is, essentially. But I feel like let's do what we talked about first with how would we define a network state? What does that look like? And essentially based on what we've kind of read so far from the network state, just kind of a short synopsis from each of us. I don't know, Matt, if you want to start that off.
Sure, I can jump in. So, as I've been reading it and trying to understand it and internalize it, and then I've also, and then Vitalik actually I think had a really good critique of the network state as well.
Vitalik, that's another one. Technological utopia.
That was a big one.
There,
I almost,
sure. Yeah, I'm sorry, I forgot about that. Yeah, good catch.
So anyway, I as I'm coming to understand this network state, the idea is that with how far we've come technologically, we have kind of an infrastructure that would let people reach statehood, a diplomatic statehood, is Balaji's vision. And this starts as this comes from a network, right? So you have a group of people online in different parts of the world, and then it kind of grows into people, a small economy of people trading goods and services with each other within that system, and then using their own currency or adopting some other currency, and then eventually buying land and then trying to gain recognition as a diplomatic state. So yeah, I think it's just this idea that there's now technological infrastructure that would allow for a new state to form, and not like United States of America, but like a nation state. But he says, he contrasts a nation state from a network state. So um, anyway, I don't want to keep rambling here, but
Sure.
yeah. Connor, you want to jump in?
Okay, yeah, I guess my understanding of the network state is just in the name itself, and that is that biology seems to kind of see this this kind of sliding scale. For those who are kind of familiar with more like philosophical ideas, but you have this Hegelian dialectic, right, where you have one argument on one side, another argument on the other side, and society kind of battles between those and comes up with a synthesis of the new kind of linchpin in a way. And so that's what the network state is. We have what we consider states and the nation states, and that's kind of been the like controlling dynamic of history, at least more recently. And now we have these ideas developing of the network, where people can use technology and use the internet to coordinate in such a way that now it's competing with this concept of the nation state. And he foresees this kind of synthesis happening where we develop network states that kind of supersede the old world and usher in the new world. So I think that's really the linchpin of what the network state is.
My take on the network state, I think that there are currently network states, and especially in Christianity in particular. If you look at like the Amish, the Mennonites, they're just not on the internet. They already have kind of a network state built in. Obviously, each different sect of, Amish or Mennonite region, they're all kind of jurisdicted, and kind of the rules are laid out by their local, what we would call a bishop, Matt. But oftentimes, like, people are sending girls to get married to other Amish families in other places. It's they're connected more than we realize. They do still use things like mail, like Amtrak. So they have their own form of a network state. They don't participate really in government at all. They focus on governing themselves in their local in their local demographic. But in turn, there are other demographics that are similar to them, but may have different rules because of where they are for whatever reason. Similar to how different states, different towns, different municipalities have different ordinances because of what has occurred in them. It's similar to the Amish, except they are a lot more bound by their core beliefs from a religious standpoint. I also think that SSPX is a lot like this. The St. Pius X group, they kind of have their own niches in the United States. It's funny, actually, as I mentioned this, because they're the group that the FBI had been going to their masses and kind of spying on them for radical viewpoints, whatever that means. Congressman Jim Jordan was actually put a potential subpoena out there to get those documents on that. But they kind of represent a network state. I think they're a little more they will vote and stuff like that, but kind of the way they operate, they're kind of a network state. So, and I'm just looking, Matt, you and I as Catholics, it's like, how do we not have that more? You get what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
you would think, if Catholic, universal, a network state just seems, it would seem like it would make sense but it just hasn't happened. And I think it has a bit to do with kind of what Matt Pinto talks about, where as a church, we're kind of afraid of the technological advancements that can bring us closer together. But I think that that's where I kind of think of modern day examples of network states that I see actually from like a religious standpoint. It's a group of people that it's usually a smaller group of people that want to live their life a certain way and don't want to be infringed upon by outside forces that could impede the way that they're doing it.
Yeah.
And some of them are respected and some of them are persecuted. It all depends on where you are, but I feel like the United States of America was built on some of these groups that have kind of network stated out, basically, from the puritanical side of it. But yeah, that's just kind of how I have look at and think of the examples that are already existing today.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think the 2 points I want to touch on what you just said. I think one is it's good to recognize like either current or historic examples of something. And so this
yeah,
is one critique, and we're obviously we like Balaji. We've talked about him quite a few times, but I think there's certain critiques I have in his network state, and I think one is that
absolutely.
anytime people come up with an idea that sounds new, or is different from like what's currently going on, like it feels really new, and then but you're right. Sometimes you look and it's like, okay, like this idea of a network has existed before. Like the only thing that's different is this technology, and maybe that's how Balaji would define network as this
Yeah,
technology system. But no, I think it's good to say, okay, wait, like this has been done before in a different scale, a different size, a different everything, but it's only different, but it's different now. This is a new iteration because of where we're at technologically, what we can do. But yes, yeah, so I think in a sense that I think you can call the church it definitely has a network to it. I don't know if we'd call it a network state in that it tries to be its own state, but there is a hierarchy. There is, if you're in clergy, there's a process to join. There's a sense of decentralization in that each individual bishop has authority over their episcopate. And then I think I was also thinking, so one of Balaji's key points here is that you voluntarily join a network state where you're forced into a nation
yeah,
state, right? We were all born in this nation, and so that's why we're citizens of this nation state. And so in a sense, I was drawing parallels, again, you could say clergy or even religious orders. We could look at Benedictines, right? They
yeah.
have, these
Network
localized
state.
monasteries. They obviously, they each adopt their own constitution. Any religious order, right? Franciscans, Jesuits, Dominicans, like they all have some sort of, they have their own governance system. They have their own, network of jobs and employers, that they kind of feed each other into. And I think the things that are lacking is that they don't try to, they try to integrate themselves at least somewhat into society to, be there. And then like, they don't try to claim their own statehood.
Well, to kind
So
of critique too, like I don't think it's necessarily that biology is saying like the presence of technology is particularly what makes a network state like possible. Because he's been pretty open that like he based his that concept of the network state on Israel, um, and
mhm.
the idea being that you have this diverse group of people all over the world that shared, their concepts of whatever it was, the commandments, the one commandment, or the case of I guess Abrahamic religions, Ten Commandments, but they shared these kind of ideologies, and then he's very particular about this idea that to become a network state, then you have to gain diplomatic recognition. So then they were able to, start the state of Israel, I guess. And so that is what kind of is his concept of what the network state is. And so that's why social orders to him aren't network states. But I don't. One thing I didn't understand is I don't understand why he dismisses. Because when I was reading it, I was like, this sounds a lot like what Christianity basically did to me. When you look at it's because it's not an ethnic thing. It's not completely tied to geography, which is what old world states and nation states kind of were about. It was basically a state made up of ideology, and that's basically what happened in the Holy Roman Empire. But he does dismiss it. I don't know why he just because I did just look for what his thoughts were on about Christianity in general, and he actually dismisses Catholicism. And his reasoning is that even though Catholics have Vatican City, it's a ceremonial state. It doesn't really quite count to him. So, but I think he's missing a lot there. I think that's almost a better example of a network state than anything else that he's been able to present. So I wish he would have dove a little more into that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think, and this is another, critique of him. I think he, he has this idea of a one commandment, and like he recognizes the need for a moral framework, but he seems to equate. He talked about the Benedict option, which I think both of you are familiar with. For anyone who's not familiar with it, as far as I know, the idea was this group of people said, "Hey, we're going to be like the medievals and start a society around a monastery, a Benedictine monastery, and just kind of grow out from there." And anyway, so he does mention that as kind of an example of a group that took a one commandment saying Christianity is good, but then his other example of a one commandment is carbs are bad, and it's like, okay, wait a minute, like one's a metaphysical claim, and then like one with a philosophical framework and moral framework and everything, and then the other's like a health thing. So anyway, I don't know. I think he, which again, and you can only go so deep in so many pages, but I think he's, there's a lot of equating of things anyway, I could go on.
Yeah, and well, I mean, like as you mentioned, Matt, earlier, he's subscribing to Nietzsche's "God is dead" theory extensively in this, and I mean, you can tell with the Pew research that the best part about this is that he does provide some pretty good resources, like outside of the Wikipedia links, that I could go without for as academically heavy as this is, and being a former philosophy
I
major
actually like the
myself.
Wikipedia links.
I don't.
I'm pro Wikipedia.
I'm a huge fan as well.
I'm fine with them to like cover the subject, but I want something a little more academically credible personally. But I understand why he went there, because he wants people to understand the concept in a quick format so they can get back to
at
reading.
Its base level,
Yeah.
Not to belabor this point, but I think it is kind of interesting because I mean, Wikipedia is essentially democratic consensus in a way. But
I know.
So I kind of like I like referencing that a little more than some of the academics would pretend. Especially because we're very familiar with how academics are definitely biased. It's not true that there's anybody who's not biased.
Yeah, but I like going to the sources,
well,
like
let me
the
say one more
primary
thing,
sources,
though.
like actually reading Nietzsche.
Right. But what people don't understand about Wikipedia is you read the article, but you go to the bottom of the page and there's all the references, and you can then read the sources there.
Yeah.
It's a very powerful tool. It's much more powerful than people give it credit for.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I do use the Wikipedia,
the footnotes. You read the footnotes,
links
you find the sources.
on the Wikipedia article a lot. Yeah, no, I would agree with that. But no, Balaji posted the Pew research that I've seen this before. I don't know if you guys have, where the amount of Americans that claim to be religiously unaffiliated has increased exponentially over the past 20 years in particular. Actually, there's another poll with this information that has been asking people the same like questions since the 70s. I forget who it's through, but they've been asking some of this like religion question, and it's gotten exponentially low. In 2023, they just asked it again, because I think it was like 1980. It was like every 10 to 20 years they asked a group of people the same question since like the 70s or 80s. And it's interesting how the religion angle, people that claim to be Christian, is dropping precipitously more, and then people that are growing religiously unaffiliated is increasing exponentially. Now, that can be another episode in itself, why Christianity is not thriving and what happened. I have a multitude of reasons as to what might have happened there, but um, just to kind of, I mean, Balaji's not wrong with that point, but at the same time, it's like you mentioned with the Benedictine model or with just Catholic models in general, like, can you imagine how much of the world we could change if every Catholic was like on the same wavelength? Like just how elections would go even.
Yeah, I think so I like where you're going with this. I think there's a part to so when Balaji mentions Nietzsche, he has he talks about the kind of transition from society, or people fear God, and then they fear the state, and then they fear the network, right? And so he said
A new Leviathan rose to
Leviathan,
preeminence.
exactly. Yeah. And so it's like, obviously we're biased, right? We're all, the three of us are Christian. This is, an explicitly Christian podcast. And so, I don't want to like, whatever, we're not playing around that topic, but, I think from a Christian perspective, if you look at what's going on, it's like, okay, you could say, oh, people stopped fearing God, so they had to fear the state. And then that's what, ran the rule for the last 100 years. Oh, but from the Christian perspective, you would say, no, like people fell away from religion. And so then obviously society went to crap, right? Like, I don't think we need the network. I think the network is cool. I think, if a lot
History
of
would
stuff ran on a
say.
blockchain, we could verify things better. There's kind of less room for corruption, which is nice, right? Because any sort of political power corrupts, right? And absolute power corrupts, absolutely. But I think society would also be better, if we had a new revival, if we went back to religion, right? If people actually
Yeah.
believed in God, right? I think a lot of things. I would prefer that to a network state. I would prefer a
Yeah, and so what I correct me if I'm wrong. So what it seems to be in this point, this is in the history as a trajectory
yeah.
section of this, and we're not going to get to the whole network state in this episode. It's a very vast document that requires, we'll be able to kind of chew on this for a while, but it's interesting how Balaji kind of talks about how God gets replaced with Gov, and then eventually people get so fed up with Gov that the network arises, and that is the new Leviathan, and everybody respects the network, and nobody would go against the network because the network is where your soul and solace lies. Like that's where your existence is, in the network. And as Christians, it's like, gee, like I mean, I love my brother and sister, but like to be like putting them at a higher, like deifying them to an extent, is just it's a stretch. It smells very Hindu a little bit, if I'm not remiss there, in terms of some of the ways that he's kind of diving into some of this. Not entirely, but there are elements of that I'm sensing, and it just doesn't really mesh with Christianity, because as you know, and I think I, mentioning this before, I think a lot of what's going to counter what Balaji writes here in the network state is basically in the epistles, with what Paul writes in those early days of the church. And just to remember, like, hey, like we're not made for this world, and an element of this, especially with kind of what Elon does, it verges on transhumanism, and it tries to uplift our human existence, but in this case, it's almost like deifying it. Do you get what I'm saying?
I do think there's a slight difference to note here, that
Sure.
I think a lot of times when he references the network, he talks about, and obviously he comes from a blockchain and crypto perspective. And so I think he talks about, as sort of consensus model. And so like you can't, you have corruption in the government because they control the money supply. But if you had Bitcoin, right, nobody could fake how much Bitcoin they had. And so I don't know. So you're right. If you rely only on social ties, then you're deifying, your your peers. But then if you rely only on this network, this is something I mentioned before, right? In terms of like decentralization and trustlessness, like, sure, I'd love for my payment to be trustless, but like, I can't, every interaction that I have is built on trust in some way. You can't like have a babysitter trustlessly, right? I need to know who I'm sending my kids to, right? Anyway, Connor, jump in. We've been going back and
Yeah,
forth a
no,
bit.
what I just to kind of carry some of those points that you were making, Matt. But I mean, you have to understand, and this is not a takedown of Balaji, right? I think we all
No,
kind of
not at
No.
like a
all.
lot of the things he's saying, but so this is not to like slander him or to like point the finger at him, but the thing you have to realize about Balaji is he is a liberal, and I don't mean like liberal in like the modern sense of like he's a Democrat or whatever. I mean that he subscribes to liberalism as a principle. You might describe him as a classical liberal, and I mean this is his own words. Um, Here he says in the beginning, he's talking about how Chapter 5 presents a proposed solution for maintaining liberal values in an illiberal world, right? So he's very cognizant of that framework. Um, and so in that kind of thinking, what he's saying about these leviathans, God, and then the state, and then the network. This is like kind of the liberal theory of social progress in a way, right? So God, the idea, people who trusted God as the ultimate authority went up against people who trusted, human progress or the state, basically. And this Hegelian dialectic played out and came out with the nation state, and basically God lost, right? God is dead. And so now we have to look at the new progress. What's going to happen next to, save us from, the previous, what has become the new God that is now bad, that has to be killed, which is the nation. And so now the network is going to be able to replace this. And eventually, the network will fail too, and something else will replace it. And we just have this endless kind of progress, right? So you have to know that is essentially the belief system that he is thinking in, and so he recognizes what's good about Balaji is he recognizes a lot of the problems that we have today, and so his proposed solution is a way that we can organize and hopefully create something that allows us to kind of thrive in our societies, um, you know, outside of the current world order. So we like that. And I think a lot of what he says in the network state computes with the things we talk about with the parallel economy, or what Michael Matheson Miller called the parallel polis. Those are very similar principles in my understanding. Even the Benedict option, which he explicitly references in the network state, it computes with a lot of these ideas. But the big critique is exactly like you said, because he can't subscribe to like an idea of ultimate truth that might come from God. We basically have to rely on consensus, and so we have to kind of atomize in a way that allows us to coordinate with people who show what we believe, right? And so so we create a very atomized world, and I don't think that that's sustainable. Um,
No, I don't think it is either. It's very modern of him to think about it this way in the philosophical sense. So, how you have the ancient, modern, and then basically it'd be considered, well, current, or it's basically what Nietzsche is. And he definitely kind of sits in that like modern to postmodern to current philosophical realm, where he assumes that these certain values are intrinsically available as just I don't know what to call it, a moral uh, man, I have not talked about philosophy a lot lately, but as you can tell, working in the world of supply chain, nobody does. But you get what I'm saying, Matt. You might know kind of where I'm going here, where he kind of sits in the philosophical realm of where he's basing his ideas in. It's very much that modern philosophy, like not necessarily Immanuel Kant, but definitely that era of philosophy in terms of who was around in during that time.
Yeah.
Seems to be a lot of the stuff like Hume, for example. Not 100% Hume either, but it's definitely vibes of that I'm getting.
Sorry, I'm not a big philosophy reader, but I think if you look at liberalism as a philosophy, I like, Connor's mention of that. And I
Sure,
think,
sure.
there's, again, I'm not a philosophy person. I don't know where modernism and liberalism, kind of compete or
All I can say is
overlap.
what he's talking about is not very
No,
Aristotelian or
Sure.
Socratic
no,
for
it's
that
Yeah.
matter.
Yeah. Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
it's
Definitely.
new because it's I mean, it's really Enlightenment stuff because yeah, that's
Yes.
where God died, right? So this is the battle that we've kind of been dealing with for the past 500 years or so. But and also to kind
Yeah.
of expound on that, because he references like the Protestant Reformation and kind of this idea of how um, networks atomize, and that he thinks that is a good thing, right? That it creates progress because now Christianity has to compete against itself, and he says like it draws in new blood, which I don't fully understand what he's thinking there, but he's like, yeah, so now they didn't really have anybody that they had to kind of ideologically fight against, and so then once that kind of came on the scenes, then it creates a stronger, um, you know, uh, potential for human progress, right? That we progress through conflict in a way.
Mhm.
Um, and so I actually think that that's kind of what the downfall of society ultimately is that because, like you said, wow, wouldn't this be great if like all Catholics kind of were on the same wavelength or whatever? I mean, Christians largely do think a lot of the same things. Like when you look at kind of the state of world politics, well, nation politics, we'll say in America, um, Christians are largely on one side, and then the other people are on the other side, right? And of course, there's a lot of people who agree with certain ideas of Christian morality, but it all really stems from this framework of Christianity that kind of defines what's right and what's wrong. Um, and so we all think this way, but we don't organize, we don't coordinate because we're not all Catholics, right? We're all sorts of denominations. So yeah, we don't have like coordination. We don't have that ability to create a network, and because we're atomized. So
Yeah. So to and kind of like you started to mention how Balaji, we like Balaji. We like this idea of again. So I don't think the network state is bad. I think and I think it's good. This is started maybe a little off topic, but I think it's a good kind of post libertarianism where there's I feel like a lot of libertarians go towards like, oh, you're a libertarian, then you go towards anarchy, is like the next state. And then Balaji definitely recognizes there's a social need, a need for a network. So I like network states as kind of the next, they're voluntary. You choose which one you want to join, all that. And I think oh gosh, I feel like I was going to respond to something you said, but then I've been sitting on this other thought. So I've read someone, I can't remember who I read. Man, I'm just having a time right now. But I read
Me too.
someone.
Me too, Matt. It's okay.
I read someone recently, and they were saying, how the church has survived, right? You think early church, and they were probably like, how are we going to continue to exist within the Roman Empire? And then obviously the Roman Empire became Christian, and then it's like, well, how could Christianity exist without the Roman Empire? And then the Roman Empire fell, and then, then they were like, how could we possibly exist without feudalism? And then feudalism fell. And so I think, I definitely see, a Christian network state. If we go the route, if nation states fall in favor of network states, I think we'll see Christian network states and Catholic network states. And I do think, and this is, I think Balaji makes this claim. I think he's trying not to be religious, but he sees like a need for some moral force binding people together. And so, and just to expand, obviously we keep saying Christian because we are all Christian, but I think any religious network state would have a much higher chance of succeeding, and not splintering out than a non-religious, right? Mm-hmm. Whether it's Jewish or Muslim or Hindu or anything else, as long as if you can get people together that share the same worldview, the same metaphysical worldview, and this is how the world works. And this is what denotes right from wrong. I think they all stand a better chance than, and perhaps you could have not religious ones, but that's harder to do. And I don't know. I don't know if there's any sort of philosophies that bind um,
Yeah,
people
I
together
mean,
well enough
yeah. So I think that's
outside
kind of
of.
like I got lost in my own rambling, but I think that was kind of the end point that I was like, so you have this thing with the atomization where everything kind of splinters, and what I think the problem with that is I don't think it really fully comprehends like the nature of people, because it's hyper individualistic, and it's like you're never going to be able to create this like one commandment that's going to unite everybody. It's always going to splinter, and it's going to splinter kind of infinitely in a way. And what really happens though is it gets I feel like it's going to get run over by people who don't, who mass coordinate, who kind of subscribe religiously to basically these kind of concepts that like don't splinter and that seek more to evangelize rather than just, leave everybody to their own in a way. Um,
And there's also a part of it, Connor, where the group that's like, no, you can't splinter. Part of that group wants to make the other group just insufferable. You get what I'm saying? And this happens on the right and the left politically. It's like the best way I've heard it, not to give not to reference Tucker Carlson, but I think I've heard him say it the best, where like America's like a conjoined twin. We can't really
no,
separate despite all the differences. There's always going to be people across the street from you that might disagree with you on certain things, and but then it's just like there's part of us that have gotten to a point where we have enjoyed watching kind of the misery of the other side when the other side loses a battle, and then vis-a-vis the other side does something and they're like, haha, we won this one. So that it's
yeah,
just kind of, it just really speaks to like where this vision of being able to have that community recognized and at least like stood out. Like that's a, I mean, shoot, there's fringe groups of people that are already doing that and they just happen to be the loudest people on the internet. That's it feels like you have to be the loudest to get
yeah.
recognized at
That's why I
least. You get what
type in
I'm
all
saying?
caps on Twitter. But no, I mean,
Any message from the crypto conversion account that's in all caps,
but
No,
yeah, no, I
it
think
is
actually
Connor.
Matt brought this up once before, but I think this is like really the point. Is like I feel like people really do want to mass coordinate. I mean, you look at like biblical history with like the Tower of Babel. That's essentially what was going on. So I think the real problem with like liberalism and this idea of like individualism and ethics, individual ethics, and we can all just kind of live and let live, and we're going to build our society, and they're going to build their society. I think it ultimately isn't really sustainable because 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 of that exact principle that like people aren't really able to just like live and let live, because some our sense of morality and our sense of justice doesn't really fully enable that. Well, I mean, you even look at like India. Balaji's Indian, right? Like the caste system is pretty awful over there. Like
Yeah.
why wouldn't the people in the lower caste just separate? It'd be like, we're done with the society, we're gonna go start a new network state. Like, what's stopping them? Well, because
No, for sure. It doesn't even matter if you convert to Catholicism in India. If you're a part of the
yeah,
caste that you're a part of, like you're still considered that in that country, no matter what
yeah.
religion you subscribe to, Muslim,
Yeah, and it's not
Hindu,
just because they can't separate,
Christianity.
it's because they won't. Because culturally, it's like, well, this is the culture,
No,
and like this is the culture I belong to, and maybe I disagree with certain things, but we conform. We conform much more than we think that we do. And I don't think it's really entirely possible that we can just kind of start to develop this sense of individualism that enables us to just, go with any society we want to and just break out of systems. Like power is going to consolidate, and then you're just going to have like these totalitarian network states that are going to conquer all the smaller network states.
sure.
It,
For the record, my India source on that was one of an Indian priest. We get a lot of them here in our diocese in the United States that will come. Matt, I don't know if you have
yeah,
any in your
yeah.
diocese, but we have a ton where I'm from, and even in the diocese that I live in now. So I just asked the question one time, and that's what that was the answer, and I was like, oh wow, that is interesting. So yeah.
Um, oh gosh, so I've been sitting on this for a minute, and I've been trying to formulate a thought that I want to say. It's a ramble.
Go.
It's a ramble. So bear with me.
Let's hash it out
But
as we're closing
have
things
you
up.
guys read
I
Dostoevsky,
have
the
it. I
Brothers
have it.
Karamazov?
I've been trying to read it for so long. I just haven't.
Oh, okay.
Good.
I read it a couple months
Yeah, I want
ago,
to read it
and
so
I
bad.
really
I've heard
enjoyed
good
it.
things
I
about it.
really enjoyed it, and I think so. So this is your call to read it. I think he a big theme in the book is kind of this divide of church and state, and they obviously, so it takes place in Russia. Dostoevsky is. I believe Russian Orthodox. He's not
Yeah.
Mhm.
Catholic, but he's Christian, and he looks at Christianity in the West, in the rest of Europe, and says like, no, we're not doing that. Like the church in Russia is different than that. And so anyway, so some of the themes, a lot of people in the book say, and it's funny because there's a lot of things that somebody says in the book, and you see both the like atheistic socialist liberals agree with, and the like very traditional religious people, even the monks, agree. Like they all agree on the statement, and it's funny because they have opposite aims. But so some of the statements were like the the without immortality, anything is permissible. And they both agreed with it, and the atheistic socialist liberals agreed with it, and they were like, oh, we like that because we want to be able to do anything. And then the monks agreed with it because they're like, yes, like that would cause the collapse of a society. And then another one is they were saying, they're like, so one of the guys wrote an article about how the goal of the church is for the state to become the church. And then someone said, oh, like, is that what Rome did? And they're like, no, no, no. In Rome, the church became the state.
Mm.
And then, I have to sit with that more. Like I keep coming back to that one and thinking about that. But it just kind of as we're talking about this, and really, I guess the theme here of this conversation is how do we reconcile Christianity with this idea of a network state? And I think, I don't know, I think it's possible. I think it's, but as we do so, I think we'll see, the more successful things come, the more that you get, the more
Yeah.
you put religion into it. I really think it just becomes more successful. So
Perfect.
that's the end of my
I
ramble.
mean, I
Sorry.
think we'll probably reach an almost time here, so we're looking to close. But I guess if I was going to leave off on something, kind of riffing off that a little bit, like you said, it's like, yeah, Christianity, and this is kind of the point I wanted to make. I don't know how to pronounce his name. Maybe you guys can tell me. I shared a couple of those articles in the Discord server about Teal'c. Do you know? Yeah.
Teilhard. I don't know. He's French. Teilhard de Chardin. Or I don't know.
Okay.
I took French in high school, but I don't remember.
Yeah. But I kind of wanted to maybe dive into that, but maybe some other episode. But I think this is what Christianity has to kind of wrestle with, because there's a lot of people. I mean, it's even a meme. Like, we have to go back, right? Like, so if Balaji or the liberals are saying that society has to like progress to this new future, the Christians and the traditionalists are basically saying like we have to go back, like pre-enlightenment. We have to get back there. And I think that is ultimately a mistake for Christians, because you never go back. That's not what happens. And Christianity is not like a backwards looking religion as much as, the atheists or the secularists want to think of Christianity as that, right? A backwards religion. So we have to wrestle with the concept of like, what do Christians need to think about and behave looking forward to the future, right? So, yeah. And I feel like that's kind of what you were getting to a little bit, even with what Dostoevsky was saying. But the Christianity has to do this. It has to copy like what it did in Rome, or something like, no, it's like it has to do this new thing that it was ultimately intended to do. Like we have to continue on the path that we've been on. We can't just return. So, and I mean, I'm not fully explaining that well. I think there's more there, but that's what we have to wrestle with. That's why I'm not explaining it, because we don't really know. But
it's the whole point of this podcast, right? We're the crypto conversion podcast. We definitely see a future that where Christianity and cryptocurrency exist. I think I definitely could foresee a future where, Christianity and network states exist. I think the more we can talk about this, the more we can reason things out so that we don't simply leave these discussions to the, the liberal moderns, who subscribe to progressivism. I think the better that we can chime in. But
yeah, no, it's good that we get ahead of this, because I've seen even certain, well, not to call out, but certain like really holy causes for sainthood get taken by these groups that just are not really there's no there, like it's all like gobbledygook, like Jesus loves us, like it's just weird. And that's why, like, I want us to not control the conversation, but at least help start the conversation, because at least we can take it into more educational realm, so to speak, or just qualitative substance itself, and that we're not afraid to read something from Balaji who might not agree with us on a lot of things that we believe in. It's like, no, this is good because there's still parallels here with what we want that are worth, like, maybe taking up in some capacity, and just baptizing what Balaji is doing a little bit and making it Christian in our own framework. So I don't know if you guys have any closing thoughts regarding this, but we'll definitely hash out more of the network state in future episodes, just because it is such a vast, it's a vast, I don't know what to call it, work, document, book. You can buy it. As we know, we're not sponsored by the network state. I recommend everybody just get it for free on thenetworkstate.com. That's where I would go to just get started with it.
I feel like I was trying to give
Thoughts?
a closing thought right before. That's what we're
Sure.
doing here. But
Connor, what were you going
here's
to
my
say?
closing thought is, Balaji, if you're listening to this, we'd love to have you on the show and talk about it.
Bitcoin to 1 million. Let's go. That's a good question.
What day are we on that? Oh no, my camera's fading out. That must mean it's time to go. So everybody, thank you so much for tuning in to the Crypto Conversion Podcast. Please like, comment, review, and subscribe, and we'll see you all on the next episode. Peace.